Hey everybody, and before we begin, I want to apologise about there only being a picture on this video. The BBC took down my initial post of this because I was using clips from the show. I will work on a better version of this in the future, but for now, I thought the video was worth putting out. See you all soon. Bye bye. Dorothy McShane, or as you know her,
Ace!
this badass streetwise kid from Perryvale, grew to become one of the Doctor's most beloved ever companions, as well as the blueprint for the modern series companion. The girl that we see at the beginning of Dragonfire is given so much development by the time we last see her in Survival. We really got to know Ace as this audience identifier with the show, and she was a fully fleshed out character. The only thing we never got to see of her in the show is her end. Where did she go? What did she do? And is she still alive? Thanks to Doctor Who's expanded media and comments made by the writers and actors, there is an awful lot that we have to go off on the life of Ace post the TV series. And I'm going to tell you what happened to Ace. Right, bear with me because this is complicated. So, just after the events of Survival, the Doctor and Ace visit a space station that happens to have Zoe Harriet on it, whilst Ace goes and visits the chemistry lab. Pretty standard story from the 1993 Doctor Who yearbook that mainly features the second Doctor and Zoe. It's called Dream a Little Dream for Me. The first Doctor and Ace-centric story we can find post-Survival in terms of chronological order is Hymn of the City, which was a short story published in 2003. The Doctor and Ace arrive in Sydney in 1942. The Doctor contacts a ferry for his ride, then warns the captain to remove his vessel from the area. He confides to Ace that a Japanese submarine will soon torpedo an American warship. Soon, they hear an explosion. Pretty standard stuff. The Doctor leaves Ace behind, Ace gets mad about this, and there's a bit of conflict from that. But other than that, it's a pretty inoffensive, fun story. From here on in, we cross into all different continuities, so we're going between the Virgin New Adventures, Big Finish, comics, and all these sorts of things, where we begin to find out a little bit about what the Doctor's true intentions for Ace were. As it turns out, the Doctor had been trying to shape Ace's mind to the point where she would be able to attend the Time Lord Academy. His manipulation of her was ultimately for the benefit of Time Lord observers, who were assessing her potential. Ultimately, however, she refused this academic opportunity and continued to travel with the Doctor. Sometime after this, Rain Creevy became a part of the TARDIS team for a short time, which can be seen in Big Finish's audio line, including Earth Aid and many others. Sometime after this, she was captured by a special weapons Dalek and was duplicated. This was in the story of the Genocide Machine. She then met James Dean in 1959. Yes, that James Dean. And the two dated for a short time, with Ace even getting a tattoo of him. But this doesn't last long, of course, as he is a temporal anomaly who has to die in 1955. So this is where it gets really interesting. Around 1990, Ace and the Doctor visited the home at the Astinger, where, unbeknown to her, the Doctor came to check on the Quantum Anvil, a temporal possibility engine created by the Astinger in their war with the Wraiths, which shattered time streams of the latter into infinite potential outcomes, leaving them intangible. Yeah, I have no idea either. Now, Ace accidentally looks in this anvil and sees many different outcomes. She sees many different outcomes of her life, from studying at the academy to becoming a Time Lord, to the Doctor leaving her, to her going around the TARDIS with a dark-haired woman, to growing old with the Doctor. And all of this is in at Childhood's End, but a lot of these we will come back to later. I always knew I'd come back to the Virgin New Adventures when talking about Ace, but she has a very interesting arc in there, so maybe you can forgive me for talking about them again. After creating and destroying the Time Worm in the initial two Time Worm books, and fixing the temporal issues with the TARDIS in the Cat's Cradle stories, Ace starts to become increasingly frustrated with the Doctor, which is an arc that spans over many, many books. As their adventures go on, the Doctor becomes less and less helpful with the universe, beginning to consider his own retirement. And this does not sit well with Ace as she goes to Earth and she sees an awful lot of atrocities. She tries to get him to help, but this time it takes a long while before the Doctor actually steps in to help, and this causes even more frustration with the Doctor. Shortly after this, Ace meets Jan Ride, a young traveller who Ace eventually falls in love with. With his psychic abilities, he is able to save the Doctor at one point, and Ace wants him to travel with them. But unfortunately, he is infected by something called Houthi fibers. Knowing he was going to die, the Doctor manipulated Jan to put Ace to sleep so he could escape and die peacefully. But that doesn't work with Ace waking up. In the confines of space, they both get in an escape pod together and are wed. But when they are put into separate escape pods, Jan sacrifices himself to save Ace and their friend. When she lands on the planet Heaven, she finally confronts the Doctor after all these years of manipulation. She blames the Doctor for Jan's death and leaves.
Ace!
Leave me alone!
I can't! I won't!
Let go of me!
I just realised I was only half there, like in a dream. I had to be. They'd have understood me otherwise, read my mind. It's something I did to myself. Oh, I should have told you that. I could see Jan was infected that night at the campfire. I didn't expect you to...
Don't tell us then.
No, I'm a Time Lord. I don't...
You were!
I saved the lives of millions of people. Isn't one person...
What? You think that's a good deal? If you let go my wrist, I'll kill you now. You know that? I'll kill you. You wanted me to leave him just because you told me to.
That may have... I mean, that might...
Leave me alone.
But it's me now, again. I'm not...
Leave me alone!
Now, what happened to Ace after that? She got even cooler. Now living in the 26th century, Ace went on to join Space Fleet and fought Daleks and other intergalactic threats. There's a particular story where she goes ham on a bunch of Daleks after they killed a ship filled with children. And a Dalek begs for mercy from her. This woman is a badass! And a couple of years after this, she briefly rejoined the Doctor, now travelling with Bernice Summerfield. Throughout the rest of the book range, she sort of popped in and out of the TARDIS, going off to do her own missions and her own wars, and then she'd come back and travel with the Doctor and Bernice Summerfield again. And just when you thought she couldn't get any cooler, when she had adventures on her own, she had a time-hopping motorbike! What? Towards the end of her time in Virgin New Adventures, Ace attended Bernice Summerfield's wedding and was on Gallifrey for the events of the infamous Longbarrow. As we move over to Big Finish, they continued the idea of Ace sort of being a mercenary for the Doctor, and in her very first mission for him, she is tasked with following Harmonious 14 Zinc, who was on the planet Eratune. Now, unfortunately, this mission doesn't go very well because Ace gets her memory wiped. She gets captured and her memory is wiped. Luckily, the Doctor is able to sort this with the help of the TARDIS, which to me may be a soft retcon so they don't have to mention all the Virgin New Adventures stuff, but I don't know. From here, we get some standard Seven and Ace stories. We get the likes of the Fearmongerer, Dust Breeding, the Grey Man of the Mountain, Colditz, and the Rapture. I missed out the tiny little detail there, but we meet Ace's brother in the Rapture, Liam McShane. Then the real kick-off point for Ace in Big Finish was the Harvest, which is where fan-favourite Scouser Hex comes into the scene. This is where the bulk of Big Finish's stories come from in their early range. We get Seven, we get Hex, we get Ace, and this finishes with Hex deciding to leave and start his own life in Signs and Wanderers, which makes Ace incredibly angry. I would go deeper into this, but I feel like there's an entire video I could do about Hex and his time in the Big Finish stories, so we shall leave it for now and come back to it at a later date. There are some other Big Finish audios where the Doctor and Ace travel around with Mel, which are quite interesting, but they're sort of in between this timeline, really. And her being part of the Time War was a Big Finish decision, so I'm going to talk briefly about that as well. In one retelling from Big Finish, Ace is taken to Gallifrey, not to become a Time Lord, but to become an agent of the CIA. where she goes on several missions on behalf of the Time Lords, becoming the agent that maybe they wanted the Second Doctor to be. I think that's pretty cool, personally. During these adventures, she is joined by Bernice Summerfield, another thing that came over from the Virgin New Adventures over to Big Finish. And in these stories, it was eventually said that she took part in the Time War. During this time, she'd been around a Time Lord called Brax, and after one particularly horrible mission, he shows her mind, and she decides that she does not want to help anymore. Complying with her wishes, Ace had her memory wiped, and all knowledge of Gallifrey and Time Lords and the Time War was gone. It is clarified that she remembers the Doctor and her adventures with the Doctor in this, and this actually goes over to the TV show. As we know, sometime after this, Ace set up her very own charity, A Charitable Earth. And by 2010, it had raised billions of pounds. During her time back on Earth, she was also able to become a professor of sociology. And this all leads into At Childhood's End, the wonderful book that Sophie Aldred herself made. We learn an awful lot about her current life, we learn a lot about why she left the Doctor, and that brings me to her departure. As I say, the Virgin New Adventures sort of hinted at a couple of departures for Ace, where she became her own person, she became this badass space agent, and that's wonderful, but At Childhood's End gave us the most recent and probably most definitive reason for her departure, and it was written by Sophie Aldred herself, so I like to think that this is probably the closest to the truth, if you want to quantify it like that. The story reveals to us that Ace was brought by the Doctor to the last resting place of the Wraiths, interdimensional beings that existed in multiple timelines simultaneously. After she was grabbed by the Wraiths when she stood too close to their containment, she was embedded with the ability to communicate with them, and was angered when the Doctor admitted that they'd come so she could act as an emissary when the time came. Then they were attacked by a horde of Astinga and were forced to flee. While trying to evade them, Ace used a can of Nitro-9 to distract them, but it ended up collapsing the ground beneath them, killing the entire group in the process. Being completely traumatized by this, she vows to never travel with the Doctor again. But she is leaving the Doctor. Which is a pretty emotional ending, I think, for her and the Seventh Doctor. It should always have been a arc of the Doctor continuing to manipulate and not let Ace get clued in, and one day she's had enough of it. And as you can see, that's happened in multiple versions of this story. I will briefly mention that, of course, this is not the last time Ace met the Doctor, as in At Childhood's End, she meets the 13th Doctor. But you can see why this video took so long to make now, with so many different timelines, so many different explanations for what Ace has done since Survival. I think the TV show should probably try and tackle it at some point to give us a bit more of a clear understanding. But with all of this information together, I can't think of a better way to end this video than a little clip of Sophie Aldred talking about Ace. So with Ace, I think it's very safe to say, very iconic companion now. In those final two seasons, we got an awful lot of development of her. Where did that begin, and how did you go about crafting this incredible character?
Oh, that's a great question. Well, really, I went on what was on the page. Ian Briggs, who wrote Dragonfire, and Andrew Cartmel, who was our script editor at the time, the character was kind of there. Andrew and I did talk a lot about the character of Ace as well, and Ian. It was great in those days because we had the rehearsal period, you see.
Yeah.
So it wasn't like it is now, where you just have to learn the lines and turn up and go straight in front of the camera. We had the luxury, although we never thought we had enough time in those days. We had the luxury of having a read through together, and then a rehearsal period of like a week before the first studio block. So we were able to kind of discuss, and I was able to really feel my way into TV for a start, and into the character of Ace. But to be honest, I don't know, I identified with her, and I don't know why, because my background was very different from Ace's, but I knew that she was the character who I could give justice to, you know?
Mm.
And I think then I had the ideas for the costume, and
Yes.
costume designer and I went off. I was very clear about what I wanted. And I kind of knew the kind of girl she was as well, because don't forget, I was 24 at the time, playing a 16-year-old. So I had that kind of knowledge, I guess, of having been through that period of my life, and you know, being able to look back.
Absolutely.
So yeah, it was something definitely that evolved.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. There's a more relatable element to Ace, I'd say, than a lot of the companions in the 1980s. She feels almost like a modern Who companion in that sense, I think.
Yeah, I definitely think that was down to Andrew and Ian, and Ian based the character of Ace on 3 real teenage girls who he'd been working with at an amateur theatre, Questus Theatre in Ealing.
Wow.
So he kind of he'd done his homework as well. So I think all in all, she was written in a very realistic way too.
Absolutely. And there is a journey that goes with Ace as the story goes on. I feel like, again, that's pretty much a first in the classic series for a companion to be such a part of the story. I have a feeling that's to do with Andrew Cartmel as well, but how did you see that arc going, you know? Let's say, should the show continue, did you know where Ace was going to wind up? Or did you get that information from story to story, I guess?
Yeah, it really was. I mean, it wasn't like we were sort of had loads of time to sit going, I wonder what we should do. Well, Andrew may have done, but I certainly would get a script would arrive through my letterbox. I would read it, we'd rehearse it, we'd film it. You know, there wasn't, in a way, there wasn't that much thought at the time. With hindsight, it's like incredible how much of the story Ace was involved with. And I think that was partly due to, I think Sylvester and Andrew had a good few chats about his character of the Doctor, because he realised very quickly with his Doctor that this was an amazing character to play, and that the way he wanted to take it was to be a more mysterious, more kind of like in the background in a way figure. And then also you start to get in Curse of Fenric, you know, the manipulation side of his character really been in evidence before. So he was very interested in having Ace as sort of like that he was a kind of mentor figure for Ace. So, you know, for me, that worked out great because I got such a lot to do, which I love.
You're beating up Daleks, you're beating up Cybermen, wonderful stuff, you know? That's one of my favourite memories watching the show earlier on, is you just taking a bat to a Dalek.
I loved all that. I absolutely loved all that. And little did I realise that it would be so kind of iconic all these years later, you know, that beating up a Dalek with a baseball bat.